The Iceman has been caught, and he has been caught so bad as now when it comes to Drake. Well, if you are ready to see how, within the stat-padding mess of Drake's 3 new albums and his new era, we have found out that 43 songs wasn't enough and he needed to juice the numbers even more. And this mess is going deeper than we could imagine because players such as Spotify were in court for helping him. Well, this is going to be a serious one. So, before we go any further, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hype up the video. And since with Drake and everything around him, we don't even know what is real and what is fake anymore. Make sure to leave that like and make sure to hype and support however you can because Drake and everything around him is working overtime right now to convince us in the world for that matter that we are seeing the greatest album in years get released, the biggest thing ever right in our faces. And if it was up to him that the rightful king of rap has returned. And the effort to do this is starting to get way more than weird as well. Within the day one streaming numbers that were reported for Drake's new Slop albums and then all the new projections that are starting to come in as all new album cycles always begin. Well, unlike every other album cycle, something is different here. This isn't like every other album rollout, and this isn't like every other artist as something very weird with Drake is starting to go down and we know it. It has officially been exposed. But the question that still remains and that we need to solve is how much we are being lied to and how much what we are seeing in terms of the streams and sales for Drake's new albums are lie and are fabricated and are part of some ploy and setup to lift up and possibly save millions and millions of dollars invested into an individual and his success. And this is where the chaos starts and where it gets bad. Speaking of those first-day streaming numbers, with a report that was released by Spotify and was talking about how Drake's new albums did and how he performed on this major day. Well, with a PR release that was put out before the full tracking day was even over. It originally came with a post that looked like this, which just the fact that this was reported even before the first tracking day was over with Spotify reporting data on these big blockbuster albums. I don't remember any time that they have done this with any other artist, even for a mega plant like a Taylor Swift. And just keep note of that because it's definitely weird. And well, they went on to say that Drake's new album Iceman had the biggest opening of any album in 2026 and the biggest streaming day of the year. And that he had the biggest streaming day for an artist in 2026, and that the intro track to Iceman, Make Them Cry, had the biggest single debut of any song that dropped in 2026 as well. Which that right there was the lie. Although, and this is the scary part, well, for most music listeners out there, they didn't know this and rightfully so. I mean, who necessarily would? But also and more concerning for the guys who run the biggest music consumption platform in Spotify, and then the guys who do the charts in Billboard. While the general population rightfully didn't know what was going on and didn't know that they were being lied to our faces, this is just terrible business on the end of the music industry. But fortunately, while most fans didn't know what was going on, there were a set of music fans who were following these individual numbers and were able to crack what was going on behind our backs. And fortunately for the truth, one fan base was keeping track of this as the only group that called this out immediately when Spotify posted this before the first tracking day of Drake's album ended. And so who ended up exposing this were fans from the group that held the #1 song this year before Drake in the name drop group on Make Them Cry. The track that fake replaced it, ironically enough, in none other than BTS. And after their fans exposed Spotify lying and the industry manipulating the narrative, and it got big enough and things got heated enough by more and more people just straight up seeing musical fraud, and again these major platforms and players promoting and endorsing and pushing this. Well, ultimately after being up for half of a day and even a little more than that in total, which already that kind of did the damage there, Spotify only then deleted the post without an announcement and put up a new one with a small apology that only did seem intended to be seen by the angry BTS stand rather than the general public who now believes that Drake's album and a single moment from it is more dominant than it actually was. Which you see why there are so many problems with this. You see why this is so dishonest, why this is disgusting, and why for Drake, he should never try to diss Spotify and call them Spotify again. Because really, Cupcake Drake, Spotify has pushed you up in your name more than you have done anything for yourself. Well, with this post after it was up for hours and hours, all the way to the point that millions saw it in other music publications and industry gatekeepers, powers, and rulemakers like Billboard reported on how Drake fared out and used the information and data here. And so now, because of this mistake, official reports that were put into the books from the biggest players in the industry in terms of something like the charts. I mean, that's one of the most powerful things that these number-obsessed artists like Drake care about. And it's simply boosting and pushing up lies. This is an insane failure on so many levels that, well, you see it for what it is. This wasn't a failure, but it was a plan to try and fudge up the numbers and cook the books all for the love of Drake, which was very obvious when they released one of the most disingenuous apologies ever, which we just need to look at what they tried to say to walk out of committing literal musical fraud. As they ended up trying to defend themselves by saying the initial streams review process was completed manually, resulting in streams from 2 different album tracks being combined. Drake continues to hold the record for most streamed artist and album in a single day in 2026. We apologize for the error and have implemented updated review procedures to prevent similar issues in the future. That is one of the most nothing statements that I have heard in quite a while. And just when you see them put this little bubble under a post which you would only ever even see and read in the first place if you went to the replies. I mean, all of this, to quote Kendrick Lamar, is showing that somebody is lying and something bigger is going on here. Even the way they're just acting so nonchalant about messing up and reporting something this major. And again, you're not a data tracking platform trying to get this from a third party. You are literally Spotify at the end of the day. You are the biggest streamer and platform for music consumption in the industry on one of the biggest days in the industry. This is inexcusable, and that's the standard this needs to be held to, because I don't know the fact that with stuff this big this is happening and you are giving this garbage excuse about how the review was done manually and how you're actively looking to fix it. Don't try it, and don't start with this, because first off, if any other major player for any other industry messed up stats with big impacts and big consequences like this, people would lose their jobs and investigations would start. I mean, could you imagine if the NBA reported wrong on Luka Doncic's point per games average and then it said that SGA had the scoring title over him? Listen, it doesn't matter how it's changed, how the apologies are sent out, and how the narrative is fixed and how the issue is resolved on the league's reputation. It would be humiliating and somebody would be in massive trouble, and the narrative would have already been set. And we need to keep that same energy for this. And at least we have to do it right here and in the control that we have, because I really need to emphasize this. Do you realize how crazy and corrupt this is and how we're only scratching the surface? And do you realize how Spotify's reporting and negligence over the inflation of everything that we are seeing for Drake trickled into Billboard, and negligence from there which maybe trickled into the sales projections, and even with Spotify messing something like this up? It makes you question the legitimacy of the data we are seeing from Drake all around, especially on their platform, and wonder how much of it is real from this album and the new albums, to even when you see all these random Drake songs from years past that really have no momentum at all of a sudden start to gain a lot of streams. I mean, with all of this, despite the fact that Spotify has been caught this time around lying for Drake's benefit and having the industry all be a part of it and all use their own power to help the guy based off a lie. If you're not sitting here thinking about where else this is happening right now and where else this is going to go, because you know it's not going to stop here, well, if you're not, and if more people are not, this is only going to get more out of control. And I genuinely do think the worst part of this, with such a massive mistake and now a fake narrative playing in fans' minds already, is that despite contributing to something that is literally causing fraudulent activity in the industry, there's no responsibility or accountability needed from Spotify for spreading this fake information. And it won't even be remembered in the long run. Although even with something like Drake mentioned on the album, and that may have not been a coincidence, a platform like Polymarket, how the narrative sent out in the industry could be used to play the prediction market in the back. If you don't think that's happening literally everywhere. And I'm jumping around here now, but it makes you wonder if there's a bigger scheme. And people are now using these platforms and using these numbers and manipulating them within their own ground to try and skew these markets, because they know the odds, or they can create the odds that then people are going to make choices against. And you could see why people would do that, unfortunately. And the reason why all of this is just so bad and why it won't be remembered and why nobody is going to do anything unless we continue to speak up and call it out like the BTS fans did. Well, it's because at the end of the day, this is the music industry. It's built on corruption and hypocrisy. That is the name of the game, and that is the prerequisite to play. And it seems like with the 43 songs that Drake delivered, no matter what you are hearing in any other lane right now, there's an inevitable truth that we have to face. And it's that for the industry, at least the ones who know that they are going to be getting the business from him, they love that their golden boy is back. Because, well, the common denominator of who runs the nasty slot machines is back and is ready to grease up the worst parts of the music business, and that 43-song love letter that he almost hand-delivered right to these platforms that solidified that he is dedicated to giving them as much music as they are going to need to keep the lights on. And for something like Spotify, let's focus in on that despite the rough batch that Drake had with them for over the last 2 years. And while all the stuff that Drake has done against them and even the industry as a whole and how he is actively still spiting all of them in a lot of ways, Drake knows he needs him, which is why he's still uploading to him. And Spotify knows that they need Drake to play the disgusting game that they continue to play. Somebody like Drake, an immoral, clout-chasing grifter who shows up to the studio with a calculator, that's their guy. And so to see that Drake has not just gotten support from all the major music platforms and players that he has during his rollout. I mean, the guy is non-stop on playlist covers again, and they are all hyping him up, and they are all trying to be a beneficiary of what he just dropped. I mean, from that, but then, to see that they are literally lying to boost up his success image and value, that should be very important and something to consider his value as an artist. And for somebody like Spotify, there's a whole conversation around how they could become a bigger beneficiary for Drake even if something with Universal falls out. Because again, while Drake may not need a record label or may not need Universal, he is always going to need a platform like Spotify. Well, listen. No matter with all of this, and no matter the level of the effort we are seeing to see where we are at, this should put an end to all that. Drake is against the industry, and he is the most hated person in its narratives, because we can't be serious with that anymore after we are seeing these platforms straight out come out and lie for him. Because with the biggest streamer in music lying for you to promote your best interest, and then to cover it up to protect their integrity after being caught. And the only reason they've even went back on any of this is because they were called out and exposed in the first place. They were never mad about lying or messing everything up here, as they tried to say. They were only ever mad and apologizing because they were caught and exposed in 4K. I just want you to think about this. And think about how much it potentially could expose, because this is also coming after a series of lawsuits and investigations around fraudulent activity within the data of how songs perform, and so much deception on if Drake has been working with major players to boost up his numbers in order to intentionally shrink the revenue splits that Drake will have to share from the rest of his peers, because that's how the Spotify model for artist royalties work. The less artists that are doing good and making from it, the better the top ones will do. And it's been said and it's been theorized that Drake has been working hand in hand to exploit this system, take food out of other artists' mouths and put it right on his. Again, while there's no definitive proof and we can't pin anything to one direct link yet, there's a lot of patterns that seem like they're starting to emerge. And again, from the music slot machine that the industry needs to all of these other issues, there seems to be a common denominator, and that seems to be the presence of none other than Cupcake Drizzy Drake. And that's just the facts. And so with this moment and break from Spotify, where we are seeing them stat pad for the stat patter of the industry, we are seeing something emerge around Drake that his fans thought would never come. But that seems to be here, at that worse than ever, which is the machine just getting back on his side in a lot of ways, and their support being behind him all the way to the point where they are literally lying for his benefit. And the reason why this is in terms of everything in the public eye changing so quick, and these powers going as far to lie for Drake, no matter what that means, well, it's pretty simple. It's because of the one thing that everyone jumped on when they saw Drake just drop 3 albums, which just is in the music industry and in the business of hip-hop. Kendrick Lamar may work hard, but Drake works lazy, and Drake rushes laziness, and rushing music gives you more music. And that is what they want. They don't want greatness. They want mediocrity. And before this beef, time and time again, he worked to rush a mid-project to market, get it onto shelves. And he was the industry's consistent quota maker, one of the most derivative hit makers, and one of the most derivative things. And alongside Taylor Swift, nobody played the game better than these two. Hence why they were loved as much as label darlings as both of them ended up turning into. And for Drake, as he seems to be becoming in a new way all over again. Because seriously, this is why nothing matters in the industry, not even the way Drake is treated. Spotify does, because no matter what names he calls them, if he is going to be churning out his slop albums on these platforms and getting those numbers up by giving them a dependable influx of music coming from an A-lister, this is enough in these circles to make you the golden child. It's really Drake and Taylor Swift who have kept up this scheme for so long and who just keep feeding it and feeding it more. And that's why their albums have this one-of-a-kind feeling where it's not necessarily exciting, but it's this mandated event that everybody has to pay attention to because, well, they are canon moments. You could say that the industry knows are coming. They know every year and every quarter that their earnings report is going to look good because one of these guys is going to come out and do exactly what they need. And the powers that be aren't going to give them everything and even put their hand on this scale and inflate their ego and inflate their success to keep them happy. At least for somebody like Spotify and Drake. We don't know the full extent of UMG and Drake, but we know these two are good and we know why Spotify would lie. They need the guy to keep making more and more music no matter how pointless, bad, and embarrassing it gets because they need to make sure they stay as one of the most hated entertainment platforms out. This is what contributes to it. Having artists flood the algorithm and flood the system like this. While behind the scenes, you are literally using that artist's success to block out and shadow other talented artists from ever getting out into the world in the first place. This all comes full circle, and this is all benefiting the powers that beat more than anything else at the end of the day, even if Drake thinks is starting to break away from them. And if Spotify is hearing the same things we are, as long as Drake is going to be doing more of this, he can continue to ruin things at a level that devolves the industry at a rapidly declining rate year after year. And again, for Drake, well, what we have seen in this era on Spotify's end is this false report on a record that he did not break. The frustrating and jarring part that we need to think about is that we do not know how deep it could go and we do not know where it could be precipitated to again. But we have seen how insufferable their love for this guy has been and how much they have pushed him everywhere, place again. It really does feel like a mini version of Scorpion with how much Drake is being shoved by a platform like Spotify especially. And well, this is all proof that we are back to the music business using Drake to be the worst team ever, and they are resorting to more aggressively offensive tactics to do so. That is just the reality of the matter because this is what the business does. And not hip-hop culture, but all these players, Billboard, Spotify, and powers like them. They seem to be very happy that Drake is back with this new album and are willing to take part in the PR plan to make him look better than ever. Because they got Taylor Swift's running mate of the copy and paste album and the musical griff greatness back at their center stage. It really does seem like the industry has learned, or at least for now, that while what Kendrick Lamar did in the beef and for GNX brought their portfolio to new heights, and a moment like the Super Bowl will create a bigger return for a rapper than we will ever see in any other way, Kendrick is not going to manufacture those moments out of nowhere. Try to keep up with the pace needed to be one of these D1 Hall of Fame musical slop runners. And since Kendrick is not playing the game and releasing a dance album and then a 21 Savage collab album every single year, well, his refusal to be the mascot for the music industry that will do whatever is asked for the purpose of getting those numbers up and keeping those checks running and is giving Drake a lot of love from the machine back because he will do what they need. And he will do it proudly with one of the worst good to bad song ratios you will ever see across his 43 new records on 3 albums. And with this, while Drake even getting back to the position to manipulate the industry, may have some question why Kendrick didn't do more to keep him down. In this regard, Kendrick knew this day would come, and he knew that Drake would be willing to get this title by overexposing how much music he was going to put out. It was only ever a matter of time, and Kendrick is clearly not concerned with this. He knows that this stuff will come and go, and Drake's numbers will mean nothing in the grand scheme of it all, especially when the guy will once again be scared to do a stadium tour. Which again, with these fake Spotify numbers, that will be another indicator on Drake's success and how much is being faked in terms of what he decides to do for his next tour. But listen, as we are seeing Drake come back out and promise to all these players that no matter what ends up happening that he will have careers worth of music ready to go. Well, we saw it here. The platforms will rush to conclusions for him and fake his numbers and records. And this is what we are starting to see now. And it's starting out here after the rocky relationship they had over the last 2 years. Be on the lookout for more of this for me and for all of us and for hip-hop, because we will know when we are being lied to on a scale that we have never seen. And that, my friends, is going to be when the wheels fall off. This is just merely the start of it. So, we don't know how deep it's going to go, but they are going to end up exposing themselves, because that's what all of these losers who focus on the grift more than the love of what they are doing end up doing. So, now with all that said, let me know. What do you think about this mess with Drake? What do you think about him getting caught having these fake numbers and Spotify lying for him? And what do you think this means for the industry? Do you agree with what I'm saying about how Drake is once again the industry darling and they are happy that somebody is going to churn the slot machine like him? And what do you think about that? Listen, let me know your thoughts on everything. I can't wait to hear your thoughts as we are seeing this Iceman album come, and we are seeing everything that's trying to come along with that. Both better and for worse, but really for worse. And so, if you made it to this point in the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and hype up the video. I can't thank you enough for your support. You're awesome. And if you want to see out before this, well, Kendrick Lamar might be coming very soon, and it could end all of this way sooner than we could ever expect. You're not going to want to miss this one. So, check out the suggested video